Hi guys, as Kunti said, I'm Ben. I'm now the country head here in Thailand. I've been here since January and incredibly excited to be here. I think, I think about the attention that this event's got. Well over 1,000 registrations and obviously a room, nearing sort of 200-300 people and key business decision makers in the room. Clearly, there's great appetite to not only sort of tap into this opportunity, but also hear about potentially some of the challenges that you might face as business leaders. If I think about this whole idea around disruption or digital disruption, I think of a few things. First of all, it's here and now in Thailand, and we're going to share a little bit of data, to really sort of bring that to life. The second is there's a real need for innovation and evolution. We as businesses, and I certainly think about this in terms of our business as well. We need to evolve. We need to innovate. There's also a real need for speed. But to really sort of bring this to life, I wanted to share with you a quick story. Just want to introduce this guy. His name is Jasper. So Jasper is the son of a man named Sebastian. Sebastian works in our Google X arm. So our Google X arm is based in Mountain View, and it's really geared around, how do we develop technologies that can change the world forever? Things like Project Loon. Project Loon is a project which is really about connecting the world through balloons. A bit of an out there idea. Things like driverless car. How do we, sort of minimize the dangers and the risks around human error? Things like Google Glass, and this is what this image has been taken with. But I don't want to talk so much about Google X. I want to talk about Jasper. I wanted to share with you a couple of things about this little guy. He's 4 years old. He's never owned a credit card. He's never bought a mobile device. He's never bought his own groceries, and he's certainly never applied for a loan. But there's a really interesting fact about Jasper, and that is that he transacted 17 times last year across gaming applications on his father's iPad. So if I think about what that means for business leaders, for us as businesses in this room, it means that the consumer that we're dealing with, not only today, but the consumer we're dealing with tomorrow, the next 3 years, the next 5 years, is going to be vastly different to the consumer that we're dealing with in the last 5 years. And as I said, it really, really sort of speaks to this need to evolve, this need to innovate, because if I think about the Jaspers of this world, we need to meet his expectations. So if I think about what that means, if we're going to keep up with the Jaspers of this world, innovation is no longer a choice. As business leaders, it is no longer a choice. So I talked a little bit about speed, to quantify that for you. This here tracks, the time it took for different technologies to reach 1 billion users. So the telephone took 110 years to reach 1 billion users. Television, 49 years. Mobile, 22, and that's obviously not necessarily mobile, internet connected mobile. Internet took 14 years, 8 years for smartphone. So if you think about the acceleration of change, it's constantly picking up. The acceleration of change is so fast that it's no longer enough, I guess, to acknowledge that things are shifting. We need to be able to move, and we need to be able to move very, very quickly. And I certainly say that with regard to our business as well. This is the big challenge for our business, and we believe all businesses in the modern world. So I want to talk about 3 things. First of all, why is this important for businesses? But not only why is it important for businesses, why is it important for Thailand? Secondly, I want to talk about the evolution of the Thai consumer. So what's the data that we see that really suggests that things are moving to a level of maturity? And then finally, look at how you can use better data to drive better results. So why is this important? I'm going to look at this from a small business angle and then look at it from a large business angle. Here in Thailand, 40% of GDP, $400 billion economy, 40% of the economy is mapped into SMEs, to small businesses. And we have data to suggest that web-enabled SMEs have 80% higher top line. Now, there's a number of reasons for that. Things like discoverability, being able to access new customers, do it at scale. But then if I think about how this then sort of translates to the Thai economy, we hear a lot about the digital economy. 40% sounds big. It's probably not as big as it can be. If I think about a country like Hong Kong, nearing on 50% of the GDP sitting in SMEs. Indonesia, 60%. Australia, well into the 70s. So there's huge headroom for growth. So we think about digitization. SMEs are incredibly important. But it's also very important for large businesses as well. So this here is a global study. And what this study looks at is 400 large firms over a 2-year horizon. Now the key message here is that businesses that were deemed to be digitally mature had vastly superior results. 9% from a revenue standpoint, plus 26 from a profitability perspective. And if you think about that, what that means better efficiencies, better data, or better data usage to make better business decisions. And then from a market valuation standpoint, 12%. But it's not all just about opportunity. It's also about risk, because traditional business models are being fundamentally disrupted. So just to talk about one really, really quickly, this here looks at the music industry. Music industry in 2008, 8 years ago, only 8 years ago, was a $20 billion industry with regard to the physical side. That now sits at 6 or 7 billion. That's an astronomical down to the right. Digital is obviously increasing dramatically, overtaken. So if you think about what that looks like, obviously download to own, digital subscriptions, and I'm sure many of you are very familiar with what this feels like. I can't remember the last time I bought a CD. When I was young, that's what I used to get for Christmas. Things have fundamentally changed. Just to sort of share some anecdotes, when I was young, in primary school in Australia, whenever there was a project that was sort of put out, whether it be on, the country of Thailand or dolphins or whales or whatever it is, all of the content that came back was always the same, because everybody used the same source. It was Encyclopedia Britannica, it was World Book Encyclopedia. That was pretty much it. If I think about what it looks like today, my sister-in-law is a teacher, and she was sharing with me, I put a project assignment out, and it comes back so diverse. And the reason for that is that access to information is incredibly real-time and incredible in its diversity. And this all comes back to digital. So there's a couple of aspects to this. One, what does that mean for you as a business leader with your consumer? They are now hyper-informed. They have so much access to so much information. But if I think, going back to this whole idea around risk, Encyclopedia Britannica was the #1. It's now out of print. If I think about Borders, one of the largest bookstore chains in the entire world, its doors are now closed. So as I say, it's about opportunity, but there is a huge risk factor to this as well. Things are moving fast, and we as businesses, and I say that, as I say, when I think about Google as well, we need to evolve. So what does this mean for Thailand, in the retail sector specifically? So what we do is we have a look at our search engine, not necessarily just in terms of an advertising platform. We also look at it in terms of a large consumer barometer. We have billions of searches. So what does data tell us about what consumers are thinking about, how they're buying, what they care about, where they want to go? And I tell you, in Thailand, it looks pretty attractive from a retail standpoint with regard to digital demand. This here looks at an indexed view of where Thailand sits with regard to retail trade consumer queries. #1 in Southeast Asia. Indonesia, #2. Let's just think about this for a second. So Indonesia has had over $1 billion of funding hit the country through venture capitalism in the last probably 12 to 18 months. Multiple $100 million plus investment rounds across many different companies, and a couple of them have been sort of shared during Paul's presentation. But Thailand's #1. Consumers are demanding information online and demanding to buy online right now as we speak. So I want to talk a little bit about the evolution of the Thai consumer. So what we do, going back to this whole consumer barometer idea, what we do is we have a look at the number of searches that we see across different subcategories within the retail sector. And we then plot that against what we would consider to be a mature market and an immature market. And there's really sort of three phases that we look at. Phase one is really around the e-business basics. The first thing that people really start searching for in huge volumes, online banking and travel. I don't know if you guys can relate to that. But there's been some huge businesses and businesses built out of this country here, built around travel. And they were really sort of scaled, not in the last sort of 12 or 18 months, but many years ago. Think about the second phase. It's really around tech, books and media, apparel and beauty. And then the third phase, we see this explosion around groceries and real estate. Now this is obviously, Google analysis. So it's, not necessarily a perfect science. It's our view on what we feel looks like maturity from a consumer behavior standpoint. And if I plot some of the countries, first of all, if you look at something like, a place like Kenya and Nigeria, they're really sort of phase one, moving just into phase two. If I think about the next wave, Mexico, Spain, and then obviously Indonesia and Thailand, sort of moving from sort of phase two into phase three. India and Brazil, a little bit further progressed with regard to consumer behavior, and there's still a lot of work to do around getting more people online in these countries. And then finally, Japan, UK, and the US. Beg your pardon. This clicker's a little bit sticky. So let's dive into this in a little bit more depth. So this here is search share within the retail space by subcategory. And to really explain, why we feel Thailand is where it's at, if you think about tech, it's already really, really big and the share's been quite stable over the last 2 to 3 years. If we think about apparel and personal care, it's already 1/3 of the country's demand within retail. Personal care is phenomenal in Thailand, shall I say. The numbers that we see running through this particular subcategory is very, very aggressive. But then if I think about, that last phase and groceries, beg your pardon. Groceries is quite small right now, but the tick up to the right, it's very, very aggressive in the last 12 months. And if you think back to the whole idea around speed, when things come upon us, they come upon us very, very fast. And the acceleration is astronomical. So I want to shift gears a little bit now and talk a little bit about what the consumer journey looks like. So I want to introduce, the whole idea around the end screen world. It's not just a desktop and mobile world. It's not just a desktop, mobile and tablet world. People are now connected across multiple touch points, with different devices and different experiences that are very relevant to their everyday life, whether it be desktop, mobile, tablet, TV. Obviously going into wearable and more and more numbers in Thailand. And then obviously the automotive industry is also becoming more and more connected. And in Thailand, I'm going to sort of strip it now back to desktop and mobile because it's the easiest to quantify. In Thailand, it really is a mobile country. Desktop is still relevant. It's still relevant. It's still 40% of the queries. But if you think about mobile growth, mobile query growth, it's over 150% year over year. That's astronomical on a very large base. This is no longer a country that is very immature with regard to how consumers experience digital. A number of businesses, not just Google, a number of businesses share very compelling data around the levels of usage around digital in Thailand. So this is a very large base and still growing 150%. In e-commerce, it's 60% mobile. So this sort of raises the question, what does this really mean? And to me, it really means that we now live in a micro-moment world. And to explain what I mean by that, it's no longer about big moments where people make decisions. Decisions are made on the fly, when people need information, instantaneously, and there's a huge amount of immediacy about how people are making decisions. A micro-moment is, how do I get to that restaurant? What do I want to buy? How do I buy it? What's the reviews of this particular product? In real time, when I'm in a taxi, when I'm walking home from work, when I'm in a restaurant. Whenever consumers want information, they can now access it because everything is connected. So rather than talk any more about it, I'm just going to share a quick video and then we'll talk about what that means for businesses.
grinding sound when you turn the key?
So it sort of raises a question, people are, they're searching, very, very immediately. They're searching in real time, but how are they finding information? So, our data suggests that 76% of people are actually using a search engine as a source of information. That's quite interesting. So it's not necessarily a vehicle to get to information, but a source of information. That's pretty compelling, because it's not necessarily talking about where they buy, it's how they get there, the research process. If I think about why it's so important to be there, 5 out of 10 people consider only 1 or 2 brands before they actually make their purchase. They might look at 5 or 6 or 7 pieces of content, 7 different review sites, maybe go to your website, but they're really only going to consider 1 or 2. So discoverability and being there when they ask in those immediate moments is incredibly important. If we think about how this translates across industries, we had a look at search volumes by subcategory, but it's fairly ubiquitous. People are researching across most industries that we care about in this room when they're thinking about making a decision. So if I think about how buying behaviour has evolved, it's not linear. It's very complex. It's multiple devices. It's multiple pieces of information. They search. They switch between devices. They compare. And comparison can be across review sites. It can be through social media. It can be through chatting with their friends, of course. And then we know this is very big in Thailand. They often search again and then they come back and they buy. Where they buy is another story, whether it be a marketplace, through a chat app, through a social media platform. Paul's shared some of the different areas where they transact. But the idea that we're really trying to get across here is that the research process is incredibly important. How do you influence at the key moments? So I've got a couple of minutes left. I'm not going to go into deep case studies. I think Lutz, who's part of our business here with Google as well, is going to share a lot of case studies around this and go a lot deeper around the different things that we would recommend. But it really comes down to a simple 3 things. First of all, fully leverage your own data. You've got a wealth of data. Every big business and small business has so much information, whether it be offline information, CRM data, or actual behaviours across your site. The next thing is improve targeting through third-party signals. Now, Google is just one. I've used Google as an example here, and this is a third-party signal. I want to buy an espresso machine in Thailand, and this is certainly something that I went through a couple of weeks ago. So it's just one of many, but it is a very powerful intent-based tool. As I say, there's many options for you to bring in to actually become more intelligent about how you reach the relevant customers at the right time. And then optimize to influential channels. Search, social, email. Tracking and data and digestion of data is incredibly important. So just to finish, this is no ordinary disruption. Things are moving incredibly fast. They're moving at light speed. And if I think about the key messages, this is incredibly important for all of us in the room. There's huge opportunity, there's huge risk. Expectations of the consumer is incredibly high and always evolving. How are we really sort of embedding a culture of innovation and evolution within our businesses to meet these demands? The second, the path to purchase is incredibly complex. It's end screen, it's immediate, and consumers are hyper-informed. And then thirdly, smart usage of your data, yours and others, can help us and you as business leaders to respond. Thanks.